certain things were taken away, as it were. And now, again, the IMF has visited. We've had this ongoing debate as to whether or not subsidies should, be part of the budget. But I mean, they always recommend that, subsidies, especially on petroleum production.
No, they don't always recommend. You see,
but that's the recommendation now.
They don't always recommend. They don't always recommend devaluation. They don't always recommend removal of subsidy. Each country's particular situation has to be studied, and they will make recommendations what you think you have to do to recover. Those are the conditionalities that if you're able to do this, if you agree to do this that will make you recover, they have nothing to do with the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund. This again is just tremendous misinformation. Now, the conditionalities are an agreed set of policies that allow your agricultural sector to recover, your manufacturing, your finances, and so on. If you do this, and your package for financing this policy is so much, then they can give you a bit of that. On the condition that you do those things. They are not conditions for the IMF, or their terms are already set, 4 to 5%, 5-year, 7-year money, depending on what particular facility that you are accessing.
All right.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Let's also look at some of the things that we're currently faced right now. Funding the budget.
Yes.
I mean, VAT, you played a very key
I
role.
introduced the VAT in 1994 at 5%.
Is it as it is today?
What do you mean?
In terms of, now we're talking about, do we increase VAT?
See, I was to head the Niger Delta study, and one of the 11 points I put in the financing for the development of Niger Delta, I said, it would be nice at that stage, because I kept hearing people wanting to increase value-added tax. Nobody's even asking me, what do you think? I introduced it. Under very tough conditions, it was almost thrown out. And General Abacha at some point said I was trying to pull a fast one on everybody. Defending it, I was having some sort of I had to call in my wife from the military hospital to treat me. And while I was out there in the corridor at Northern Barracks, Abacha was making the joke that KK is trying to pull a fast one on us by saying having chest pain. So maybe it was very funny that way. Anyway, we passed the value-added tax. The Ghanaian came to talk to me about their own system, and they ended up jacking theirs to about 15%. And they had riots in Ghana. Of course, some people said, it's the IMF that suggested that. I was saying this to a gentleman I know who wrote a whole article. This is what I'm saying. It's the IMF that started trouble in Ghana. But the Ghanaians, I said, we are doing 5%. You could do 7% or 7.5%. They went and started at 15%. They thought this was a captive revenue source. They can just say whatever they could. And they had riots. Okay. So by the time we were working on the Niger Delta, I thought it would be nice as a contribution by every Nigerian to the development of the Niger Delta. This is something we could rationalize and say we're going to move the value-added tax to maybe 7%, 7.5%, and so on. So there is nothing preventing us from increasing value-added tax. We can broaden the base and also increase the rate. And
do we increase it, or first of all, strengthen the collection method, go to those areas?
No, all those things can come together. It's not one or the other. In fact, that goes for just about all our tax areas. I'm not one of those that will think, somebody, for instance, wrote an article, I believe it was in this day, how those are low-hanging fruits. You just erroneously define those as the non-oil revenues. The non-oil revenues are non-oil producing sectors, not taxes and tariffs and customs. And I sort of sent a note to say, see, these so-called low-hanging fruits are really not on their own. They are part of the tree. So if the economy is not doing well, you're not just going to collect more revenue because you are raising tariffs and customs and so on. As you said, I did a lot of work on Korea on protection. In fact, my dissertation was tariff and non-tariff protection and patterns of trade structure in Nigeria. But I did a lot of work on protection with the Harvard Development Institute and so on and so forth. So there is no reason why you see, I think there's a tendency to think just make up revenue by raising rates. The emphasis should be on getting growth, expanding growth, and you reduce the overall burden of the tax that you create.
That
because
speaks to multiple taxation.
What?
Multiple taxation.
No, that's not multiple taxation.
No, I mean, they also need to address that kind of challenge as well. Because
well, in terms of cleaning out the tax system, obviously, you need to address multiple taxes. But I thought you were referring to multiple taxes. Okay. So we need to look at the entire thing. That's why we have to make sure that people who are handling these things understand what they are doing. That's all it takes. Is that confidence as to how it's like trying to lift a 747, all those little things. You know exactly which ones you put in, how much you punch out, and so on and so forth. That's why you have to have people who really understand.
Could you tell us, what do we do about stabilizing the Naira?
Well, as everything I've been saying, you should really be spending less time worrying about the Naira. You should be looking at the things that contribute to determining the value of the Naira. That is really the issue. We are spending too much time on monetary fine-tuning, fiscal fine-tuning. We should be looking at the productive sectors that create the productive base that ultimately in the short, medium term, depending on the gestation of the projects we are funding, will bring down the prices.
Yeah, but
certainly we took some funny actions which I had pointed out, and I see now that we are beginning to go back. When you said you couldn't allow people to deposit foreign exchange in banks, when what you should do is, by all means, take whatever deposits, make sure your records are there. So if there are any questions, you bring out the records. But to keep foreign exchange outside the system, and the Naira is depreciating for want of enough supply of foreign exchange, doesn't make any sense. And then we've talked about, for the short term, most other countries have gone through what we've gone through. You access the financing that will tide you over. It's just the normal thing that you do in business. But that takes us a lot of
the manufacturing sector and small businesses is very important that we look at ways we can help them stay in business.
Yes.
And I guess it was in 2013, I was reading a piece about you, a news story where you said Nigeria made a big mistake not taking the IMF loan. That was what I was.
We go back to the IMF. Well, if I said that,
we're looking at.
Let me correct something.
A minute. Let me just finish on this. We're looking at a system whereby you said something about understanding, just in case it boils down to understanding, so that we can make it clearer for Nigerians and even those in such businesses. They need to be financed, whether we like it or not. Well, and if there's any good in such facility from the IMF, time for us to hear from people like you.
You don't need to hear from me. We've been out of the scene for a while. These younger ones should open their minds. The model of the minds are closed. The example I gave the other day, or the other minute, about, say you had a deficit of 10. The optimization is how do you get the 10 at lowest cost? So whether it's called IMF or ADB, that's where they come in. So one cannot just say, well, we made them. If you don't finance adequately, which is what we did when we chose the second-tier foreign exchange market, I had turned that thing and put in my basket. I said, that's not what we're going to do. I'm not going to go into the rest of the story. I've been writing about it recently. You see, if you do not finance enough, that means you cannot perform. You cannot perform. And if you're talking in terms of getting adequate foreign exchange funding, that means your exchange rate value will have to go down in relation to the foreign exchange because of inadequacy of funds. That inadequacy is the issue, not whether it's IMF or World Bank. If you get it from anywhere and it makes sense, and the project is viable, I don't know what word to use. It's irrational not to do it. So let's not get fixed on the fact that it is, we didn't take IMF loan, we didn't take World Bank. If you don't finance adequately, your objectives cannot be met. And if it's in foreign exchange, that means there will be pressure on your Naira. And whether you devalue or not, it will depreciate.
All right, let's take a break. Not to worry. We'll be back in a minute and then conclude our conversation with Dr. Kalu Idika Kalu.